Have you ever felt perfectly at ease in your own company, even when others call it being antisocial? Maybe you've been told you're too quiet, too distant, or maybe someone hinted that spending too much time alone means you must be lonely. But deep down, you know that's not the case. You're not avoiding people, you're embracing peace. There's a quiet kind of power in solitude that few truly understand. But if you're someone who enjoys your own company, someone who finds comfort in a soft afternoon breeze, the rustle of trees, or the sound of your own thoughts, you might just belong to a very special group of people, people with a rare kind of strength. Walter, a retired schoolteacher, knew this well. He was never the loudest voice in the room. He didn't need to be. After his wife passed, people expected he'd feel lost without constant companionship. But instead, Walter grew calmer. He sat on his porch each morning, sipping his tea, watching the world go by. Neighbors would wave, and he'd smile politely. He wasn't unhappy. He was just full of memories, full of thoughts, full of something deeper. Well, it was like you see, there are certain personality traits that often show up in people who genuinely enjoy solitude. And if you recognize yourself in these traits, it's not something to change, it's something to cherish. For starters, you may be a deep thinker. You don't just skim the surface of life, you dive in. Whether you're pondering something from your past or reflecting on a conversation you had decades ago, your mind has depth. You can spend hours revisiting memories or solving the quiet puzzles of life. You don't fear silence because that's where the answers often rise. Maybe you've noticed that you don't need constant reassurance from others. That's called emotional independence. You're not looking for applause or attention. You don't need someone else to tell you your life matters. You already know it does. That strength, that centeredness, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's earned. It's carved out through decades of experience, heartache, joy, and learning how to sit with yourself. And chances are you're selective with your relationships, not because you're unfriendly, but because you've learned that time is precious. You'd rather have one deep conversation than 20 shallow ones. You don't waste your energy on drama, and you're not interested in playing social games. You value honesty, presence, stillness. And when you find someone who understands that, well, you keep them close. Walter used to say, "I'm not lonely, I'm just not looking for noise." He didn't go to every gathering or fill every afternoon with plans. Instead, he found beauty in the rhythm of his own days, reading a book, tending to his tomatoes, feeding the birds. These weren't chores, they were his rituals. They gave shape to the hours. They reminded him that peace doesn't need to be loud to be meaningful. You might also find comfort in silence. In a world that prizes constant stimulation, those who enjoy quiet can seem like outsiders. But really, silence is where the soul breathes. You're not afraid to sit in stillness. In fact, you may crave it. While others rush to fill every gap with music or chatter, you listen to your breath, to the wind, to the small voice inside that gets drowned out when the world gets too loud. That's emotional clarity. And with that clarity comes another trait, observation. You notice things others miss, the way someone's eyes drop when they're tired, the sound of the trees changing seasons, the subtle shift in your own emotions from day to day. This awareness isn't just sensitivity, it's wisdom, and it grows in silence, in solitude, in the spaces where there's no pressure to perform. You're probably not one for chaos either. You like things calm, grounded, predictable maybe, not because you can't handle change, but because you value peace. You've had enough storms in your life, you don't need more. Your boundaries are firm, your heart is steady. You've figured out what's worth your time and what's not. And perhaps most importantly, you've learned how to comfort yourself. That might be one of the greatest gifts solitude has to offer. When things go wrong, when life feels heavy, you don't always run to someone else to fix it. You take a walk, you write it down, you breathe through it. You've built your own emotional toolkit, and you trust it. That's not detachment, that's maturity, that's resilience. Walter knew this better than most. When his daughter moved across the country and his house felt emptier than usual, he didn't panic. He pulled out the old sketch pad his wife had given him years ago, and with every pencil stroke, he poured his feelings onto the page. Not to show anyone, not to prove anything, just to reconnect with himself. That's what people who enjoy solitude understand. Sometimes healing doesn't come from others, it comes from within. And isn't that what most of us are really looking for? Not more noise, not more distractions, just the freedom to be ourselves fully and quietly. You don't need to explain your love of solitude to anyone because deep down, you know. It's not emptiness, it's fullness, it's contentment, it's being at home in your own skin. So if you're someone who likes to be alone, take heart. It means you've grown strong roots. It means you're not afraid to face your own thoughts. It means you've discovered something many people spend their whole lives searching for, the joy of your own company. There's something remarkable that happens when you no longer feel the need to fill every moment with people or noise. You begin to notice how stillness sharpens your senses. You can walk into a room and feel the energy without a single word being spoken. You pick up on the smallest cues, a sigh, a look, a pause. It's not just intuition, it's presence, it's attentiveness, born from years of listening to the world and to yourself. And because you've cultivated that stillness, you've probably also developed an appreciation for order and routine. While others might chase novelty or crave stimulation, you find meaning in repetition. The gentle rhythm of your day, the way you make your tea just so, the walk you take at the same hour each evening. These aren't just habits. They're grounding. They're rituals that give your life shape and calm. Some may see it as predictable, but you know it's something else. It's sacred. It's the architecture of a peaceful life. You've likely discovered that in these quiet moments, creativity has space to bloom. It's when your hands are busy knitting, sketching, cooking, or even just watching the birds that new thoughts arrive. Some people think creativity is loud and explosive, but you know better. Sometimes the best ideas come in whispers, in pauses, in the way morning light hits the floor, or the rhythm of your footsteps along a quiet trail. Walter found his creativity in the simplest of things. He began keeping a journal, not to write anything profound, but just to capture fragments of the day. A funny dream, the taste of a ripe peach, a memory from his childhood that surfaced unexpectedly. Over time, those fragments became something beautiful, a mosaic of quiet moments that gave his days texture and meaning. He never showed it to anyone. It wasn't for the world, it was for him. That's another trait you may recognize in yourself. You do things for the joy of it, not for applause. You don't need an audience to validate what you love. You're not chasing approval or likes. You're guided by something deeper, your own curiosity, your own values. That's what makes you authentic. And in a world so full of noise and performance, authenticity shines brighter than ever. Another thing people who enjoy solitude often share is resilience. You've probably faced your share of storms, maybe even more than your share, and yet here you are. Maybe you've had to rebuild after loss. Maybe you've had to learn how to live with uncertainty or how to comfort yourself on days when no one else seemed to notice you needed comforting. But instead of growing bitter, you grew strong. You didn't fall apart. You adapted, you adjusted, you took your time, found your footing, and carried on. There's a quiet heroism in that, one that doesn't shout or seek the spotlight. It simply endures, like a lighthouse that keeps shining even when the sea gets rough. Others might not see it, but you know the work it takes to remain calm, to remain kind, to remain whole. That strength, the one that doesn't ask for recognition, is often the strongest of all. And because you've learned how to rely on yourself, you likely don't cling to people. You care deeply, of course. You love with your whole heart, but you don't confuse love with dependency. You've learned the difference between being with someone because you enjoy their company and being with them because you're afraid to be alone. That distinction is powerful. It means your relationships are chosen, not needed. It means you can stand on your own and still reach out when it matters. That's why people who enjoy solitude often make exceptional friends, even if their circle is small. You're not interested in superficial chatter. You want depth, connection. You ask real questions. You listen with your full attention. You may not be at every party, but when someone sits with you, they feel seen, they feel safe, because you're not distracted, you're not performing, you're simply present. There's a kind of wisdom that develops in solitude. You begin to see through things, through noise, through pretense, through pressure. You understand that not every invitation needs a yes, and not every opinion deserves a response. You've learned to choose your energy wisely. You know how to conserve your peace. You figured out that your time, your presence, your attention, they're all sacred, and not everyone is meant to have access to them. Walter often said, I used to feel guilty for saying no. Now I see it as protecting my peace. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shutting the world out. He was just honoring what felt right. And that shift, the ability to say no without apology, is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity. You've probably stopped explaining yourself to people who don't understand. You no longer feel the need to justify why you're not going out tonight or why you're happiest in your garden or why you'd rather read a book than attend a gathering. You've let go of that need to be understood by everyone because you've realized you understand yourself, and that's enough. That's perhaps the most defining trait of all. When you enjoy solitude, it means you're secure in your identity. You're not searching for yourself and other people's opinions. You've arrived. You've come to know your patterns, your triggers, your joys, your needs. You know what soothes you, what energizes you, what feels like home, and instead of resisting it, you embrace it. There's nothing small or sad about that. In fact, it's a sign of growth, of healing, of self-respect. To reach a place where your own company is enough, that's a victory. Not a retreat from the world, but a return to yourself. And so when people say things like, don't you get lonely or don't you wish you were more social? You don't bristle. You just smile gently because you know something they might not. You know that solitude is not loneliness. It's a sanctuary, a space where your soul can stretch out and breathe. That's not to say you don't love people. You do, deeply, but you've learned to love them without losing yourself. You've learned that connection doesn't require constant presence, that love can exist in the quiet spaces between words, and that sometimes the most powerful bonds are the ones that allow room for silence. So if you find joy in being alone, if you feel replenished by quiet mornings or still afternoons, take pride in that. It means you've cultivated something beautiful. It means you've found your own rhythm, your own light, your own peace. And in a world that often rushes to fill the void, you've learned the rare art of simply being. People who are comfortable being alone often carry a quiet kind of confidence that doesn't announce itself. It's not about pride or ego. It's about knowing who you are without needing to shout it from the rooftops. You've spent a lifetime learning your lessons, weathering your storms, making peace with your past. And in that long, winding journey, you've become someone you actually enjoy spending time with. You don't fill your days with noise just to avoid silence. You don't fill your schedule just to avoid stillness. You've grown to understand that the most meaningful moments aren't always the loudest or the busiest. Sometimes they're found in the hush of a sunrise, in the comfort of your own breath, in the joy of doing something quietly and well with no one watching. You've likely developed a keen sense of boundaries. You know what lifts your spirit and what drains it. You're not afraid to decline an invitation or step away from people who no longer feel aligned with your values, not because you're cold or distant, but because you've learned to protect your peace. And when you find yourself in the company of someone who honors that peace too, it feels like coming home. People might not always understand this way of living. They might mistake your quiet for sadness or your solitude for lack. But you've come to see that alone does not mean empty. It can mean full, full of thought, full of insight, full of contentment. You've built a life that reflects what matters to you, not what impresses the crowd. And that takes courage. Walter once told a neighbor, I used to think I needed to be everywhere. Now I realize I only need to be where I feel right. That wisdom didn't come overnight. It came from trial and error, from saying yes too often and learning when to say no, from trusting too easily and learning to listen to that quiet tug in your gut that tells you when something's off. If you enjoy solitude, chances are you've also become someone who is deeply self-aware. You know your own emotional patterns. You catch your own moods before they spiral. You've developed the ability to sit with discomfort without needing to run from it. And maybe most beautifully of all, you've learned how to self-soothe, to calm yourself with your breath, with your thoughts. That's a rare gift. Many people spend their whole lives avoiding their inner world, but not you. You've befriended it. And in doing so, you've become a steady anchor, not only for yourself, but for those lucky enough to truly know you. You might not say much, but when you do speak, your words carry weight because they come from reflection, not reaction. You don't need to be seen to feel seen. You don't need applause to feel valued. You know how to validate your own feelings, how to hold space for your own needs, how to rest without guilt. And because you've cultivated that kind of inner safety, you often create it for others without even realizing it. You're probably not the life of the party, but you're the soul of the room. People feel calmer around you. They open up to you. They trust you, often without knowing why. It's because your presence is grounded, because you're not performing. You're just being. And in a world of noise, that authenticity is magnetic. You've probably stopped comparing yourself to others. You've let go of the race to be admired, the race to be busy, the race to prove yourself. You understand that life isn't about keeping up. It's about slowing down long enough to actually feel it, to notice the small joys, the way sunlight dances on the floor, the smell of something baking, the pleasure of putting your feet up at the end of the day and knowing you've earned your rest. Solitude has taught you how to savor, how to live in the moment, how to appreciate what's right in front of you without rushing off to the next thing. You've learned to delight in simplicity, and that's no small thing. In fact, it's everything. You know that fulfillment doesn't always look like excitement. Sometimes it looks like contentment, like exhaling, like sitting in your favorite chair and feeling absolutely no urge to be anywhere else. That is a kind of richness the world doesn't advertise often, but you've found it. You've also likely found that as you've aged, your desire to please others has softened. You no longer bend yourself into shapes to make other people comfortable. You're kind, but you're honest. You're generous, but you're not a doormat. You spent too many years learning who you are to abandon yourself for the sake of harmony, and that makes you both strong and free. People who enjoy solitude tend to live with quiet integrity. You do what's right, even when no one's watching. You keep your promises. You honor your word. You don't need to be told to do the right thing because your inner compass is strong. You know the value of trust, and you don't take relationships lightly. You may have fewer people in your life now, but the ones who remain, they're the ones who matter, the ones who get it, the ones who don't need you to entertain them, perform for them, or be anything other than exactly who you are. And those relationships, even if few, are deep, real, nourishing. The truth is, solitude isn't about retreating from life. It's about engaging with it more honestly, more meaningfully. You're not hiding, you're listening. You're not isolating, you're tuning in to what matters, to what feels right, to the kind of life that suits your soul. So if you've ever questioned whether there's something wrong with the way you enjoy your time alone, let this be your reminder. There isn't. In fact, it's one of the clearest signs that you've grown into yourself, that you've stopped chasing and started living, that you've discovered the beauty of your own company and realized that sometimes that's more than enough. You are not missing out. You are tuned in. You are not alone. You are aligned. And the peace you've found in solitude, that's not something to explain away or feel guilty about. That's your wisdom showing. That's your spirit resting. That's your heart finally at ease.